In this EPQ tutorial video, we're going to be talking about the project proposal process. We're going to be talking about what makes a good project proposal. We're going to be talking how to submit your project proposal, and we're going to be looking at some common issues to avoid that occur quite often, so that you can make sure you don't fall into those traps. As you're watching the tutorial video, remember that you can use the pause button and rewind if you want to go back over something. And if you have any questions, make sure that you contact your supervisor or your centre coordinator, Mrs. Stroll, and get answers to those as soon as you can. So, first of all, what is the project proposal? When you do any research project, whether that's at school now, whether that's at university, whether that's as a postgraduate, if you're going to perform a piece of research, whatever subject you're in, you will need approval for that research. So at EPQ level, what we're looking at is submitting a formal plan or outline of your proposed research project. This then gets reviewed by your supervisor and the centre coordinator, and then your proposal is either approved, in which case you can start your research and organise your planning review meeting with your supervisor, or your proposal will be rejected. If that happens, that doesn't mean you can't do your EPQ. That means you need to act on the feedback that you've been given in Part B and Part C on Project Q, and then make some changes and then resubmit it again, so that we get to a point where your research plan can go ahead. All of this process is happening on Project Q, and we'll show you the pages that you're going to use. But this is one of the most useful aspects of doing the EPQ, because whatever subject you're studying, if you do a research project at university or beyond, you will need to get approval for your research project before you start. So it's great that you get the opportunity to go through this process now. So if we have a look at Project Q and where we're filling this project proposal in. So this is your Project Q, your project log account on Project Q. And remember, we've got this list of the different parts of our project log here. And we are on Part A, Candidate Proposal. You've already completed your record of initial ideas, and you might want to remember to add a completion date at the bottom of that before you move on to Part A, Candidate Proposal. Let's have a look at the boxes that we're being asked to complete on here. So first of all, a working title of my extended project. Present the topic to be researched in the form of a short statement, question or hypothesis with a clear focus. So put your current working title or question in here. Now remember, this doesn't have to be the final form of your question. Your question, your title can change all the way up to your mid-project review. This is just to give us a clear idea about where we are with our question development. So we complete this box here first of all. The next box, my initial resources, will be, this is where you're going to give specific examples of the sources that you have found during your initial research phase. So you've been starting to think about what you wanted your EPQ to focus on, you've been finding initial sources, you've been having meetings with the centre coordinator and your supervisor to discuss what your project will be on. The initial sources that you have already found need to go in here. So we need references in here. It could be links to sources that you found online. It could be a citation to printed sources that you found useful. But make sure your initial sources that you're planning to use are put in this box. And tell us what you think, which aspects of the research you think they're going to be helpful for, so that we can see evidence that you have been conducting your initial research and that your proposal is based on research. Next box, the courses of study or areas of personal interest to which the topic relates. In this box, you are essentially explaining why you have selected this research project, and you're being asked to justify and explain your decision making. The EPQ, your research project, is a very personal thing, and they want to see why you've made these decisions. Essentially, there's no wrong or right answer for this box. They just want to know why you have selected this research project and what's informed your decision making. So write in detail here. We want to see you writing. This is an opportunity for you to give us evidence that you are managing your project, making decisions about your project, and though that evidence will gain you marks in your AO1 manage section of the marking criteria. So do do really take time to fill in this box in detail. If we then scroll down, we get to my intended product here. So this is what the final outcome of your EPQ is going to look like. Now remember, we've got two options here. We could make an artifact, which is a physical product, or we could write a written report, which would be a 5,000 word report. So we need an idea about what you're thinking at the moment. That doesn't mean it can't change, but do put what you're intending to do for your final product in this box here. Don't just write a 5,000 word report. Tell us what you think will be covered in the 5,000 word report. What sort of issues are you going to analyse and discuss? What will the outline be? If it's an artifact, tell us what you think the artifact will be, how it will, what will be the key things about it, how will it be made, what resources will you use. So this is a really important box in terms of giving evidence to us that you have fully planned out this research project. And then finally, right at the bottom here, you need to add details of your A-levels that you are studying. This is so that we can perform all our dual accreditation checks to make sure there's no overlap between your research project and your A-levels. And then when it is complete, add the date in here and then email your supervisor to say that it is finished. So if we continue to think about what makes a good project proposal, it's worth us having a think about these 5 points here. So these 5 points are from the EPQ specification document that you have access to on the EPQ Google Classroom. And these are it's like a 5-point checklist where the supervisor and the coordinator are assessing the potential of your project proposal. So if you think about these 5 points, when you're doing your proposal, you're less likely to have an issue with one of them. Remember, on top of this, we have our key dual accreditation check, where we have to check that there is no dual accreditation between your proposed research project and your A-level courses. So that's sort of almost like the 6th point. So let's have a look at the 5 points in detail now. So, point number 1. Does the working title of the project and proposed action allow the student to investigate and to access the higher level concepts and skills in the assessment objectives, i.e. plan, research, analyse, evaluate and explain, rather than simply describe and narrate? So in terms of how this relates to your proposal, what we're looking for, if there's an indication that your proposed topic is going to be very descriptive, so you're going to give us a list of things that you found out from your research, rather than analysing, comparing, synthesising, and so on, we're going to have to say no to your current proposal and ask you to go back and have another look. Then the next thing to think about is with your title, if it's a title where you could type it into Google and get an answer, then your title is too simple and your project aims and objectives need developing further. So this first one is making sure that your planned project is going to be of a high enough quality to let you access the highest marks available. And if that is not the case, as we can see from your proposal, we're going to ask you to go back and have another think. And this is not us being punitive or trying to sort of punish you, but this is us making sure that you have got the best possible chance of accessing the highest A and A star grades possible in the EPQ. So it is all for your benefit in the long run. In the next part, number 2, are the working title and proposed action clear and focused on an issue which can be managed within the timescale, available resources and word title? So first of all, on the previous page, when we were asking you to give specific examples of resources, this allows us to check whether there are available resources. Sometimes students come up with really fantastic research proposals, but they haven't checked that they can actually find the resources needed to conduct the research, and then their project runs into trouble. So are there sources available? Give us examples so we can check. If you've got a really interesting research area, but you're finding it tricky to find resources and you would like to just double check that you are searching efficiently, please do just come and book a meeting with either your supervisor or with Mrs. Stroll, and we can go through that and make sure that those skills are in place. We're very happy to go through those skills again. The other question to ask yourself with number 2 here is, can you answer your question fully in 5,000 words? Sometimes, and this happens actually more than number 1, people have a tendency, because they're very passionate and excited about their research, to plan to do too much, almost to the point where it would be a sort of a master's level or undergraduate level research project, sometimes even more. You only have 5,000 words. So it is in your interests to select a research project that you can fully answer in those 5,000 words. And remember, as we've been saying from the very beginning, it's better to research a smaller area in more detail and depth and analyse it in depth than it is to try and research a broad area and look at it all in quite a superficial way. Okay, so really think about that. Are you actually going to be able to fully answer your question in the 5,000 words that you have? And if not, we need to tweak it. It might be that you're not quite ready to tweak your title yet because you need to do research in order to do that, in which case make it clear in your project proposal that you realise you are going to need to refine your title further, and then we know that you have got a good handle on your project and you are managing it well. If we have a look at number 3 now, does the working title and proposed action indicate that the student will be capable of investigating and researching the topic, or carrying out the activity or task independently, safely and ethically? Now, we were talking in our academic skills sessions before Christmas about ethical research, about health and safety, and about safeguarding. This is vitally important. There is no wriggle room with this at all. So a couple of things to think about. Is there a safeguarding issue with your research? So this could be that you're planning to contact people to conduct your research that might put you in harm's way, in which case it's a no on the project proposal, it's not getting approved. It might be that you're planning to access sources that expose you to harmful material, in which case, again, from a safeguarding point of view, we cannot approve your research project. So make sure you're not asking us to approve a project that there's no way we can approve. In terms of the ethical research, we had our ethical research session again before Christmas, and we were talking about this very key idea that if you're going to involve people in your research, you need to make sure they are fully informed about what the aim of the research is, that they have consented to be part of the research project, and that you protect their identity and their anonymity. We need to see details of how you are planning to conduct your research ethically in your project proposal. So you cannot sort of make a passing comment that you might try and interview somebody, or you might give out some questionnaires to people for them to fill in. You need to show, if that's what you're intending to do, which is absolutely fine, how you are going to do that research ethically. So we want to think about you writing a letter of consent that gives participants clear details about the research aims of the project and gets them to opt into the research, for example. So have you made provision for your ethically conducted interviews or questionnaires? And then finally, number 4 here, is there a danger that the student will be unable to approach the project impartially and in a balanced way? With this one, what we're looking at is, can you be objective about your research? It's very, very common for people to want to conduct a research project that relates to them in some way. A lot of research is very personal. What you need to check is, especially if you're looking at political viewpoints or if you're looking at experiences that might have had an impact on you, you have to be objective in your research. And if you are too closely related to the issue that you're researching, that can be very tricky. A couple of things to bear in mind. If you give us the impression in your project proposal that you have already formed a conclusion to your research project before you've conducted the research, that's not an indication that you're being objective. And so we're going to be concerned about that and question that further. If you are investigating a sort of a psychological issue that might be applying to you, then we need to see that you are in a frame of mind where you can approach that issue objectively. Otherwise, we're going to have to suggest that we look at something else. The final point here, it says, is the student likely to face difficulties understanding the concepts associated with the project topic? This doesn't often come up as an issue with the proposals, but if you're going very, very high end, that might be something worth thinking about it. But it's not often something that is an issue with our project proposals. The only final thing to say here is in terms of back to number 3 with the safety aspect of the research. If you're planning to do an artefact build and you're planning to use the resources in the hive, or you're planning to conduct a science investigation, we need to think, rather than sort of exposing yourself to harmful content in your sources, we need to think about details of how you're going to perform your risk assessment and the use of a technical mentor and using the equipment safely so that you don't come to any harm. So those details would need to be in as well. So in terms of how to submit your proposal, you need to add a date at the bottom of Part A project proposal. You need to send an email to your supervisor to tell them that it's ready for them to have a look at. And then you can continue with your initial reading and making your project plan and getting that ready, because you will need your project plan for your planning review meeting once you have received project approval. Your supervisor is then going to review your project proposal Part A, and then either two things will happen. They will either suggest additions or changes or alterations to your project proposal so that it can be approved, or if they think it's in a good form already, they will go on and complete the supervisor proposal Part B, and then it will get passed on to the centre coordinator, who will complete Part C and then either approve your project or ask that you make revisions or ask that you resubmit. Please, please, please remember that you cannot start your research project until you have had project approval from Part C. Sometimes we get people that are so keen to start their project, they just start the research, and then actually when they get the Part C approval or feedback, it turns out that there's a dual accreditation issue, or there's a safeguarding issue, or there's an issue with it being too descriptive. And then because they've already done so much research, they're very sort of reluctant to then adapt and change their project. Do not start your research project until you have had project approval from Part C. The process is there to support and help you and enable you to get the best possible EPQ grade you can. So do just wait for us. If you have acted on all the points in this tutorial video about your proposal, it will not take long to approve your project proposal. Project proposals take a long time if we haven't been thinking about the things that we've had lessons and instruction on, like the dual accreditation, like including the specific examples of sources. So if you act on everything that we talked about in this video, you'll have a very good project proposal, and then it won't take long to approve it. So just be patient while that is coming in. So just as we're getting to the end, a couple of key points to really be aware of, because these are the most common issues that come up year on year with project proposals. So if you make sure you haven't done these, you're probably in quite a good place for submitting your project proposal. So first of all, the most common one is not giving specific initial sources that you have found in your initial research phase in your project proposal. We want references, we want links, we want to see specific sources. If you merely write that you're planning or intending to use journals, books and articles, you're not going to have your project proposal approved. We'll send it back for you to do some more initial research. Next, not giving enough detail about your current plan for your project. If your working title and question is very broad and vague, and then you simply put at the bottom of the proposal that you'll do a 5,000 word project, there is not enough evidence there for us to check that you have got a clear plan about what you're doing in your research. And so you need to not start your research, you need to go back and plan it out thoroughly before you start. This will save you time in the long run because you've got a clear idea about what you're trying to do. Next, proposing the use of interviews or questionnaires but not giving details of ethical considerations. Please make sure that is clearly defined in there, and don't just put, I will make sure my research is ethical. Show us how you're going to make sure it's ethical. Our next one here, not giving enough detail for a dual accreditation check. We cannot let you invest 90 hours of your time, because you're very busy, on a project that is not going to be awarded a qualification at the end because there's an overlap with your A-levels. So you must give us enough information to make sure that we can complete a dual accreditation check. If you don't give us that information, we will just assume that there is a dual accreditation issue and your proposal will not be approved. So please make sure you give us that information. A lot of you have been very proactive about contacting your A-level teachers, collecting confirmation via email that there's no dual accreditation issue, and then passing that on to your centre coordinator, Mrs. Stroll. So that's been really good. But if you haven't been doing that, please be aware that might be the reason that your proposal isn't approved. And then finally, if you give us a really large research topic rather than the research question, remember in our University Research Skills Conference afternoon, we were talking about how you can turn a topic and explode the terms and then do initial research, make decisions, and then you can turn that topic into, very specific research questions. We want to see that you've been through that process already. That's what the time has been for so far, to explode those terms, research the different areas, and then make decisions about what you're most interested in and what's going to be most successful. If we think you haven't done that, we're going to ask you to go back and do it rather than starting your research project. So do keep that in mind as well. So in terms of what happens next, you submit your proposal in part A, your supervisor completes part B, and then it's passed on to the centre coordinator who completes part C and then tells you whether your project has been approved or not. Once they have been completed and you have that feedback, you'll receive an email, and then your next job to do is to have your planning review meeting with your supervisor. In order to be ready for that meeting, you need to take your detailed project plan about what's going to happen between now and the submission deadline in terms of you doing all the jobs that you've got to do to complete your research project. And you take that to the planning review meeting with your supervisor to discuss. And then you'll also need to complete the first box on the project plan, on the planning review page on Project Q, and that is where you show you have acted on the feedback from Part B and Part C. Even if you've done a good project proposal, your supervisor and the coordinator will give you feedback about how to improve your project. It would be silly to not act on that and take that on board. So in terms of just checking what we said we were going to talk about, we said we were going to talk about what makes a good project proposal. We've spoken about how to submit your project proposal and making sure that you email your supervisor to let them know that it's ready to have a look at, and some common issues to avoid. Please bear in mind that there are a large number of EPQ students, and so you have to have a realistic expectation of how long it is going to take your supervisor and the centre coordinator to process these project proposals. We have put deadlines in place so that there is sufficient time for all of the proposals to be reviewed and approved, and you still have enough time to do your research. If you hand your proposal in late, or you start contacting your supervisor or the coordinator just before the deadline, expecting a sudden rush emergency meeting so that you can meet the deadline, that's not going to be possible because there are so many students doing the EPQ. So please manage your time effectively, plan ahead, and be patient once you have submitted your proposal, because there's more than one student to an application to review. If you want any feedback or an update on how things are going, please just email your supervisor or the coordinator. If you have any questions, do let us know, and we will see you in your next academic skills meeting.